Hi friends, it's Miracle and today I'm bringing you my Sri Lanka reading wrap-up. If you didn't know, I run a long-term reading project called From and About Asia Reading Project to read, learn, and celebrate the diversity of Asian culture by reading. And I'll leave all the detailed information down below, including a webpage and how to join, and a Discord server where you can have a more in-depth discussion with. Sri Lanka as our country of interest in May, so we read all about it, and I also watched a documentary on the topic of Sri Lanka. But before we begin, I want to address that Sri Lanka is now in the middle of an ongoing political crisis, and people are really suffering from the consequences, both economically and also politically. I'll leave some links and articles about how we can learn about the current crisis in Sri Lanka, and also some resources on how we can help in the description box down below. So please go check it out if you're interested to learn the current event in Sri Lanka. And now let's talk about the books that I read about Sri Lanka or by Sri Lanka authors. The first book I want to talk about here is Funny Boy by Shyam Salvastor. This is a historical fiction set in the 1980s in Colombo, the capital of Sri Lanka, and our protagonist is a boy who is considered funny in his childhood because he likes to play with the girls and also dressed in dresses. So he's facing a lot of pressures from his peers and also his family. Not to mention that he grew up in the time when the conflict between Tamil and Shihana have really upgraded. So we follow his story coming of age, learn about the war and also his sexual awakening, and how he learned the political environment in Sri Lanka by just witnessing everything going on at the same time. Although this book is a work of fiction, I feel like I learned so much about the country of Sri Lanka from it. The family of the protagonist is a Tamil family, but they live in Colombo. It's far away from the center of the war, but Colombo is also a city that dominated by Shihana people. So their life is greatly impacted by the ongoing conflict in both of the war zone and also the conflict between Tamil and Shihana in Colombo. Their family business is constantly at risk, and his father has to work so hard to keep everything in business. And the schools divided pupils by their ethnic groups and even teaching different languages, and violence and conflicts are everywhere, and people's thought and reactions towards the war evolves over time as well. From all of that, we learn how the society works in Sri Lanka at that time, and also how people need to deal with the constant discrimination towards their racial to just go by. And on top of that, the protagonist also entered puberty, so he has some awakening and also have to come in terms with his sexuality as well. This book is quite a page turner for me. I didn't want to put it down when I was reading it, and I just want to know what will happen to the boy and also his family next. The boy introduced us a lot of stories of his family members as he also found them out, and some of the stories are quite heartbroken and also showed you the cruelty of the war and human conflicts. Another thing I loved about this book is how accurate the boy's voice is to his age. He was quite small at first and he was super confused. He gradually learned everything by asking questions, by just wandering around and witnessing and see more. And I just love his growth and development, and they're so wonderful to read about. I actually recommend this book to generally everyone who likes a good historical fiction. I feel like you don't need to be interested in Sri Lanka in particular to want to read this book. This is in general a really wonderful queer coming of age historical fiction, and just read it if you're interested. The next book I want to talk about is Island of a Thousand Mirrors by Naomi Munawar. This is another historical fiction set during the Sri Lanka Civil War. It's talking about the fate of two young women. One is living in a rich and wealthy family in Colombo, and one is living in the war zone, and how their fate intertwined and story going on. This is actually the first book I read for Sri Lanka, and I had high hopes going in, but was unfortunately quickly disappointed. I featured this book in one of the reading vlogs I made in May, and in that vlog I actually expressed a lot of feelings about this book. This is a book that is not long, it's only 240 pages-ish, but this book has 2 family trees. So you can imagine how many characters there are in this book and how rapidly they were to introduced to us. There aren't any time left for us to develop connections with these characters, and I just feel like I didn't learn as much as I expected from such a wonderful setting, and also the narration is confusing from time to time, so in general I didn't enjoy this book. But luckily I read Funny Boy after this book, and that book actually delivers everything I wanted from this one, so that's why I talked about Funny Boy first. The third book I read is a nonfiction, is Wave by Sunani Dhiraniyagala. This is a memoir. On December 26, 2004, the author unfortunately lost all his direct family members in the tsunami happened in Sri Lanka. As the sole survivor of the family, the author recounts the terrifying moment when the tsunami happened and also all her emotions and things afterwards. This is not a book that I normally would pick up specifically for this project, although I love memoirs and nonfiction. I usually wanted to pick up something about the nature, the culture, the politics of our target country, but this book was highly recommended by one of the members of our project, and I'm so happy that I read it. I just feel like this is a book that I would pick up on my own, despite if I'm doing this project or not. This is a wonderful and also very heavy book about grieving, and I was surprised about how many layers of emotions that grieving can have and how people have different reactions to each layers of them. Grieving is something that every one of us has our own interpretation about, and also every one of us has different experience about. And maybe because the experience of the author is so sudden and so tragic, her interpretation of grieving is very powerful for me, and also I learned so much that grieving is not only about the sadness but also very complicated and very strong and somehow very angry sometimes. I also appreciated how honest the author is about her mental state and mental health after the tragic happened, and a lot of the descriptions, a lot of the events that follows really blew my mind. I feel the saddest and also the strongest when the author started to recount her memories with her families, her husband in particular. I feel like it's the moment when the realization and recognition arrives that you started to think about the past memories of people. And it's also the start of acceptance. So it's a very powerful moment for me when I was reading it. And I recommend this book to anyone who likes a good memoir. You don't need to be interested in Sri Lanka in particular, and this is just a fantastic memoir to read. I have another nonfiction I plan to read for Sri Lanka. It is The Seasons of Trouble by Yohini Mohan. This is a nonfiction full of 3 people's story, how they lived through the time when Tamil people are heavily discriminated after the Sri Lanka Civil War. However, I didn't have time to finish this book, and I don't want to wait for too long to wrap everything up. So I think I'll just mention it here, and when I finish this book, I'll report back on my channel. Besides the books I read, I also watched a documentary on Sri Lanka. It's called My Daughter the Terrorist. It's a 2007 documentary talking about 24 years old young women who live and fight side by side for 7 years in an organization called Tamil Tigers. Tamil Tigers is a militant organization that is largely viewed as terroristic. The documentary is largely interviews with the 2 young women. They talk about their visions in the organization, how they became friends, and what they do daily, and how they trained, and also what they prepared for their mission. What stunned me the most about the 2 women are the tones when they talk about life and death and also their missions, as if it's a very natural part of life. But as viewers, we know that a lot of times the missions are dealing closely with death. And the documentary also interviewed the mother of one of the young women, and she talks about how and why her daughter became and joined the Tamil Tigers, and how their life was like before, and how they had their belief systems, but her daughter kind of find that didn't help and decided to join the Tamil Tigers. I was surprised that the mother was constantly smiling when she's talking about her daughter. especially knowing her daughter's life is constantly in danger. But in the end, they are living in a war zone, so it really didn't matter to her that if her daughter is inside or outside of Tamil Tigers, the life threatening is always there. So for her interpretation, it's more like she's happy that her daughter is having her life now. I read an interview with the author, and people asked her why she wanted to do a film about terrorism. And she said the film is not about terrorism, it's more like telling the difference between the terrorist and a freedom fighter, and also showing the cost, the human cost of any conflict. And to me, this documentary is a chance for us to see the individuals behind these militant organizations and see their reasoning and their humanity. In the end of the documentary, the two women were transferred, and the director of the film lost contact with them and couldn't find them afterwards. This is one of the few documentaries I can find about Sri Lanka, and I think it's very well worth watching just because it is the first time that the personnel of Tamil Tigers are allowed to be interviewed, and I just feel like the two young women, although they are under a lot of pressure of the organization, they are speaking pretty honestly in front of the camera. And I just feel like no matter how you think about these individuals in these militant organizations, you'll be shook all along. And that's my wrap up for Sri Lanka. Again, the country is under some ongoing political crisis, and people are really suffering from the consequences. Please go check out the articles I linked down below if you want to learn more. And I hope you find this video helpful and informative. For From and About Asia reading project, currently in June, we are reading all about Tajikistan and Central Asia. And in July, we'll be reading about Yemen. And the following 3 months, I will announce pretty soon on my channel. Please join the Discord if you are interested in participating, and let me know any of your thoughts about the books or documentaries I mentioned in this video, or your thoughts about the country of Sri Lanka. And also don't forget to say hi in the comment section down below. Thumbs up to this video if you liked it. I hope you're happy reading, stay healthy, stay safe. I'll see you in my next bookish video. Bye!